So I'm going to try something new today. Instead of talking about Dead Rising or Jurassic World Evolution, I'm going to take a look at a game from my childhood. Well, more like the remake of a game from my childhood. SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated is a 2020 remake of the famous 2003 video game. I don't think I need to spend a lot of time explaining what the game is, since many people grew up with the original. Essentially, it's one of those collectathon 3D platformers that were common throughout the early 2000s, but with locations and characters from the SpongeBob franchise. The plot of the game is that Plankton has created an army of robots, but they run amok and begin terrorizing Bikini Bottom. The original is a classic to many, but I feel like a lot of people brushed over the remake and still prefer to the original because of the nostalgia and the massive speedrun community behind it. Seriously, you can't turn 2 feet on the speedrun side of YouTube without seeing something about the original game. In fact, it's one of the main reasons that Battle for Bikini Bottom was even remade. As I said earlier, I feel like on the casual side, this game got overlooked and kind of bashed by game critics. I don't know if it's because this game didn't really change much from the original, or maybe it was just another reimagining of a classic game that was all too common around the latter half of the 2010s. However, I actually enjoyed it. And fun fact, it's the last physical game I ever bought from GameStop. Recently I got the platinum in this game, and it's actually what inspired me to do another tier list discussion hybrid video, but this time on the game's iconic levels. I haven't seen another video like this, except for a small section and Super Butterbun's review of the game. This should be interesting because unlike the Dead Rising and Jurassic Park games, my opinion on these levels is strictly doesn't come from a casual viewpoint, as I have almost no speedrun experience with this game, other than watching some runs. I do have a few preliminary things to state before the video. First, only the rehydrated versions of the levels will be analyzed. This is mainly because, unfortunately, I'm unable to record the original version, but the rehydrated versions are mostly identical, with a few minute changes I will mention. Second, boss levels, the hub level, and the special post-game level won't be on this list. And third, let me just say I don't hate any of these levels, even my least favorite levels bring something to the table. Because there are 9 main levels, I'm going to trifurcate the tiers into 3, S tier, an okayest tier, and the bottom tier. Here's some of the criteria I analyzed, and all of my footage is coming from the PS4 version of the game. Again, if you disagree with me or have your own insight, please let me know in the comments. Unlike my previous tier list, I'm going to start this list from the bottom tier. So, let's get to the video.
Downtown Bikini Bottom, once a bustling metropolis, now a debris-covered crater.
Okay, on this channel, I've had some controversial takes, but I think this one takes the cake. Y'all can go ahead and give me hell in the comments, but I think this level is just kind of boring and bland compared to the others in the game. Okay, let me start with the new robots that appear here, because there's quite a few. The G-Love and Chuck are introduced, which aren't really hard enemies. I feel like Chuck got nerfed in this remake. I remember this guy giving me trouble in the rooftop section. I really do think they slowed down his projectile and nerfed his precision. The Chomp Bot is also introduced here, but doesn't get a cinematic. He's essentially another version of the common fodder robot. The only difference is his attack isn't a one and done. It can actually linger in the air for a bit. Now I will say, if you like long levels, then you'll love this one, because I feel like this level just goes on forever. Now let me run through the level's layout. The first area is an open area where you have to use the sponge ball, which is introduced here and rarely shows up later. The entire last quarter of the first area and the entirety of the second area is basically a Sandy tutorial. I do like the second level more because visually it looks better than the first area. The third area is basically a combat challenge with one sock, and there's a one-way exit back to the first area. But wait, there's an entire fourth area accessible from the first area, the Sea Needle. This area contains some spatulas and the remainder of the level's collectibles. Okay, so what do I not like about this level? First off, I feel like this level just goes on and on. I feel like the Sandy section goes on for way too long. And I'm not a fan of the visuals. Like the next level on this list, I don't know if it's just like the color palette or the layout, but something didn't work for me when I was younger, and it still isn't working today. It just looked kind of bland compared to the other levels. Second, I kinda like the theme of this level, but it's so calm and mundane compared to the other themes, and because of that, it doesn't save or redeem the level. If it was more upbeat or energetic, like the Goo Lagoon or Jellyfish Fields themes, then it could work. Funny enough, everyone seems to think this theme is the best in the game or the most iconic. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate it, but I think there's other themes that deserve the spotlight. It's like the Ratchet and Clank fans who think the Metropolis theme is the best in the game. Yeah, another hot take. Ratchet and Clank fans, you're not safe in this video either. Third, the Sea Needle. Oh man, in the remake, I do not like this area. For some reason in the remake, the Tiki challenge kept glitching for me, making obtaining the spatula requirement more difficult. The Tikis kept glitching out of range and would only reset if I died, and it kept doing this weird first person kind of thing. Also keep in mind you have to pay to enter this area, which at this early in the game, you might not have a lot of shiny objects. And on top of that, you have to backtrack here once you get the cruise bubble for a spatula. Don't worry, a certain level in my top 3 also has this problem, and I'll adjust it later. For all these reasons, I think Downtown Bikini Bottom belongs at the bottom of my list.
The Mermalair, secret fortress of the wrinkly superheroes Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy.
Okay, so this one is going to tick some people off. This is the first level after you unlock the Bubble Bowl, and boy does it show. How you defeat the enemies? The Bubble Bowl. How do you complete these puzzles? The Bubble Bowl. How do you complete the level's main goal? The Bubble Bowl. How do you defeat the mini-boss in this level? The damn Bubble Bowl. Alright, I think you get the point, but let me run through the level's layout. The entrance level is honestly kind of pointless. It's more linear and nothing really happens. You're introduced to the Arth robot, but he isn't too tough, and he's kinda uncommon throughout the game. There's also only one sock in this entrance level, and a pretty cool Easter egg. You don't even get the level's main goal into the second area, which kinda acts as a mini-hub. This level is actually somewhat open, as it isn't linear like something like the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. The second area has the most of the level spatulas and side challenges, and there's an area where you have to pay to access this other level for one of the objectives in another challenge. The third area has most of the level's platform challenges, mainly the color change and floors. Also, this area has a shiny objects requirement for a sock, not even a spatula, which is kind of annoying. This platforming part had me screaming at my TV like the angry video game nerd. I should state that I feel like this level flies by way too fast, and that seems to be a common criticism of the mid-game levels. The final section of this level is where you might feel some padding. The final area is the ballroom, and the only thing in here other than the spatula is a sock. This also contains the infamous ball challenge. And this is another controversial take, but I really don't think this challenge is hard. Even when I was younger I could do it. I don't mean to sound like Billy Badass, but I don't get why people act like it's impossible. It can be tedious, sure, especially in this one section, but I think it's pretty easy to see what you're supposed to do and how to do it. And yes, this is where the infamous GameSpot reviewer could not complete the challenge. Finally, if you complete the objective for the level, you unlock the final area, the villain's containment area where you fight a mini-boss, Prawn. Like I said, you use the Bubble Bowl to fight him, and he's a pretty easy mini-boss. Nothing much to it. So yeah, even though I said this level flies by, it's kinda massive. 4 areas. 5 if you include the mini-boss arena. You're probably wondering why it's at the bottom of the list. Well, in my opinion, it just appears a bit monotonous. I don't know why, maybe it's just because there's 3 other cave areas in the game. It just seems kinda overdone. There is some unique scenery here though. But again, maybe it's just the color scheme, something just doesn't work for me here. Gameplay wise, the platform and puzzles can be a bit annoying at times, but as I said, not impossible. I will say, the music here is cool, but unfortunately for me, it doesn't completely save the level. I know a lot of people feel different, but it's just lacking in my view compared to the other levels.
Here we are in the kelp forest, an interesting area with many sights to see, for those that don't get hopelessly lost first.
Wow, here's a shocker for a lot of people. Kelp Forest is not at the bottom of the list. To be fair, if I was basing this on the original game, then Kelp Forest would be at the very bottom. So on the PS2, Kelp Forest was so dark, it was hard to see anything, which is a pain because this level is so focused on puzzles and platforming. Funny story, when I was younger, in the original, I never completed this level. I usually just got impatient in the caves because at this point, you can find all the campers in the level, and I had enough spatulas for the final boss. This means I never saw the final section, the kelp vines. I actually didn't even experience the kelp vines until the remake. I just assumed, like an idiot, that the caves took you back to the entrance level. And, after having the luxury of playing the remastered version, I think this level gets a lot of hate. Oh, believe me, it's far from perfect, and I'll address the problems with it in a bit. So anyway, let's begin breaking down this level. There's 4 areas: the outskirts, the kelp swamp, the kelp caves, and the kelp vines. There's nothing too special about this initial area other than you receiving the level's mission from Mrs. Puff to find the campers. I don't mind the platform in this area, but this Patrick Seesaw is pointless. There's also this plant that slaps you and is invincible. It's weird, it's the only one on the level, no one ever talks about it, and I'm pretty sure it's not a reference in the episodes. The swamp is when things get more annoying, because the Tika challenge can either be harmless or tedious depending on who you ask. The only thing to note here is that there's a rare, free bungee jump for some shiny objects, and a weird glitch with this leaf. Oh yeah, the leaf platforms in this level are annoying, and they can be death traps if you're not paying attention. The caves, however, are very tedious. Barnacle Boy gives you another fetch quest on top of the camper one. It just feels tacked on because the crystals are only confined to the cave. Not to mention, this area is a bastard. You constantly have to backtrack to the only bus stop in the area to switch characters, and it takes so long. Also, because of the confined environment, this is one of the only few times the monsoon robot is troublesome. There's also some progression tied to the cruise bubble, and that can be a bit annoying. The funny thing is, despite the tedium of this area, I will say I love the music here. It's legit in my top 3 favorite tracks of the game. It's basically the Kelp Forest theme, which is already awesome, just slowed down. Honestly, it's the only time in the game I think a sub-area gets a different theme from the level itself. The kelp vines also feel tacked on in my opinion. You know it's going to be a pain when the area has its own cinematic. This is no doubt the hardest time challenge on a slide in the game, but despite a lot of people complaining online, it usually just takes me 2 or 3 tries before I beat the challenge. Don't get me wrong, the first 2 attempts can be BS, especially if you accidentally go the wrong way and the game just jettisons you off the slide. Anyway, I know this is one of the first levels they made in the original, and maybe that's why the latter half of this level feels weird, like they weren't sure what to do. Oh yeah, this level also introduces 2 new robots. The Tublet, which can sometimes be a challenge, as it regenerates if you don't defeat every piece, and the the tiny laser one. Although it can be dealt with in one hit, do not underestimate it. If you don't take him out quick enough, he will get a hit off on you. Speaking of that, there's other intimidating robots here too, like the Sleepy Time, the aforementioned Monsoon, and even Arf comes back, and so does G-Love, which becomes kinda rare in the late game. So it's like an enemy reunion in an all-around overhated level. But hey, despite there being a lot wrong with this level, I don't despise it. Heck, it's not at the very bottom of the list, so that should tell you something.
Welcome to the dark depths of Rock Bottom, home of strange creatures and souvenir t-shirts.
So this level is often jugged through the mud, but it isn't at the rock bottom of my list. Okay, dumb jokes aside, but I was juggling this level, the Murmurator, and the Kelp Forest when writing the script for this, and when I edit this video, I might even change my mind again. Rock Bottom actually does have some concepts that I like better than the Murmurator. For one, I like the visuals. The Rock Bottom architecture is cool to look at, and the art museum is visually distinct and awesome. Heck, they even have some unique NPCs to the area. People seem to hate the Trench of Advanced Darkness as they consider it one of the more confusing parts of the level, if not the entire game. People also aren't a fan of the first area because you have to use the sponge ball to navigate it. I actually don't mind that part. Compared to some other levels, it's not the most difficult. The coolest part of this level is the museum, and my biggest nitpick is that we don't see a lot of it. Just like the Goo Lagoon caves, you're in this linear area for a few minutes and then you're out. But here, it disappoints you more because the art museum is pivotal to the level's plot, so you think it's going to be this huge deal, but it ends so fast. One weird thing to note is the next area spawns you in a SpongeBob, even if you were playing as Sandy. I don't think any other area does this. As for the Trench of Advanced Darkness itself, the only thing I have to say is it can be kinda hard for you to find your way around. And there is a part where you have to pay a decent bit for a sock, which I'm not a big fan of. This area seems slapped together in my opinion. There's this one strange portion where Plankton assigns you a task to cut on these random lasers. Yeah, does your mind go to sci-fi lasers when you think of rock bottom? Yeah, I don't remember that in the episode. Turns out you have to do this to progress through the level, and when you're done with this location, you spawn this newish section of the first area where Mr. Krabs notifies you of a new spatula at the bottom of this slide. Difficulty wise, there's a few things about this level. The sleepy time robots are introduced here, and they appear a lot in this level. They can deflect your bubble bowl and will attack if you rush them. The trick is you have to sneak up on them, and only SpongeBob can sneak. Sure, Sandy can insta-kill them, but you have to get close enough, and I swear, like the Tartar, these guys got buffed. They attack way more often and can attack you from further away. After this, only a handful appear later in the game. Sneaking seems to be the main theme of this level, with both these enemies, these unique platforms that fall if you jump or run on them, and sneaking into the art museum. In fact, even the awesome music for this level sounds like something in a stealth mission in a Call of Duty game. This is also another collectathon level where the collectibles are spread out throughout the level, but there's only a few, and they're pretty easy to find. The socks in this level are also pretty easy, and if you're looking to 100% this level, I don't think you have to return. And I think that's it for Rock Bottom.
The graveyard of ships. Somewhere among this haunted mess, a fearsome specter waits.
The Flying Dutchman's Graveyard is a favorite to many, but to me, it's in the middle of my list. A lot of people play this level last, before they fight the final boss, maybe because there's a spatial requirement, the platform in this level can be tricky, and there's a mini-boss at the end of the level. So it does have a penultimate level feel to it, as it can be challenging at times. I remember as a kid, these sails that you have to wall jump off of made me rage. There's also these mausoleums in the first area you have to position in a certain way to progress. It actually does take a bit of brain power to figure out how to move them. Luckily now that I'm not an idiot kid, these puzzles and platforming sections are way easier, but with one minute change. In the remaster, SpongeBob's wall jump is way faster, so it can take a few tries to get used to this, and it can be pretty annoying at some parts. Moving on to the plot of the level, you have to help the Dutchman regain control of his ship while defeating the robot ship. Compared to the other levels, I would argue this one is the most linear, and it's probably the shortest of the late game levels. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's still a lot of cool things about this level, mainly the music and visuals. The layout and theme of this level doesn't seem monotonous like the Murmur Layer. Speaking of visuals, I love how you can see the ships in the background. That happens a few times in the game, where you can see your ultimate objective in the background. I also love, compared to the Dutchman's Ghostly ship, the robot ship actually looks like, well, a robotic ship, like something out of Ratchet and Clank. This detail was in the original, but the color palette and graphics of the remaster make this detail more obvious. There's only 3 areas of this level, 4 if you count the arena where you fight the mini-boss. Oh yeah, you fight the Dutchman at the end, and honestly he might be the easiest mini-boss. The socks in this level are very easy to find, and there's only 3 of them, which is the lowest throughout the entire game. I will say there's 3 spatulas that I think can evade some players. The spatula on the Dutchman's crow nest, the spatula on the boat in the first area, and in the same area, the one where you have to use a cruise bubble on the tanker. I'm not gonna lie, some of these I had to look up when I was trying to platinum the game. Honestly, it is cool you have to interact with the environment to get that last spatula. It's one of the very few spatulas that require some interaction like that. This same spatula also requires the use of the SpongeBob, and I think this is more challenging than the rock bottom SpongeBob section. On the topic of challenge, the Slick Robot is introduced here, and he is the last robot you encounter. He's also the toughest. Essentially, he spits globs of oil that make the character slip over a certain area. He also has a shield, which hurts you on contact, which can lead to some inconvenient situations. His shield can regen, and he takes 3 regular melee hits to the feet. He got a major buff in the remake, both intentionally and unintentionally. Intentionally, his oil globs can damage you on impact. The unintentional buff is the slip effect might be glitched, because there are times I'll be under its effect, but it will be nowhere near the puddle. This is a pretty cool level, but just like another level in a bit, maybe if it brought more to the table, or was a little bit longer, it would compete with my favorite 3.
Sand Mountain, where sea creatures go to enjoy an afternoon of falling down.
Sand Mountain is an all-around pretty fun level. This level's gimmick is that it's 90% slides. Essentially, there's a ski lodge which acts as the level's hub, and there's 3 slopes which increase in difficulty as you progress. Although in my opinion, I think the second slope is actually harder than the third. Regarding difficulty, that's it. There's no new robots introduced, and the very few combat sections in this level are pretty easy. Well, depending on how you progress through the levels, this may be the first level you encounter the Bombot. But there's no cinematic for this guy, and he's not too difficult to deal with. In fact, sometimes he'll just chase you off a cliff or end up blowing himself up. Moving on to the slopes, you receive a golden spatula when you reach the end of every one, but you receive another one if you beat the slide's time challenge. Sometimes if you die, you might forget to restart the challenge. I've done this many times and have not realized until I'm halfway down the slide. You'll also have to redo the slides a few times if you want all the socks. The second slide even has an area-specific collectible for a sock, the 8 Snowmen. This counter also resets when you die, which is annoying. The level reuses the Bikini Bottom hub theme and honestly fits pretty well. Not to mention I just love this theme. The slopes require shiny objects to unlock, but at this point in the game you should have enough, unless you've been spending them on Mr. Krabs. There is one thing I have to mention regarding the rehydrated version that drove me up the wall. So the Frosty Bungee spatula will just refuse to spawn on some save files. I don't see a lot of people talking about this, and it seems to be a very uncommon glitch that unfortunately affected me. Also, there seems to be no way to rectify this, despite what some comments online say. There is no patch or anything post-release, so this save file is permanently stuck at 99 spatulas. It seems to be random when it occurs, as I had to start 3 separate save files until I was able to get the spatula. Sorry for that mini rant, but it did peeve me for a while. Overall, despite that, Sand Mountain is a useful level to gain some shiny objects, socks, and spatulas in the mid-game. On some lists, Sand Mountain is either ranked the best or somewhere close to the top. If this level was maybe a little bit bigger or took longer to complete, maybe it could have beat Jellyfish Fields for me. But I don't hate this level, and it's pretty solid. So, let's move on to the final tier.
The rolling green hills of Jellyfish Fields, a place to experience nature at its most raw, and sometimes a bit tender from the stings.
I would argue Jellyfish Fields is one of the more iconic levels of the game. It acts as the game's tutorial and teaches the player most of the mechanics. Maybe that's why this level was huge. Honestly, I sped through most of the levels for the sake of capturing footage easier, and I think I spent the most time on this level. This is one of the more open levels of the game. There's 4 areas in this map, and they're all pretty spacious. Jellyfish Rock, Jellyfish Caves, Jellyfish Lake, and Spork Mountain. Jellyfish Rock is the entrance of the level, and is 70% tutorial. Half of Jellyfish Cave is just a Patrick tutorial, but it doesn't drag on for too long. Jellyfish Lake has some platforming that requires you to switch back and forth from SpongeBob to Patrick. Spork Mountain is the smallest area, but there is a massive slide, and it has the first mini-boss of the game, King Jellyfish. So, unlike most mini-boss areas, there's more than just the arena. Also, unpopular opinion, I think King Jellyfish is one of the more difficult bosses of the game, mainly because he tracks you and follows you. Moving on to the common enemies, you meet the first robot enemy of the game, the Fodder. But you also meet the Hammer and the Tartar. Difficulty-wise, this level isn't tough. I personally think the Tartar was made harder in the remake, because I swear they gave this thing iframes and a faster recovery for when it can shoot. Oh yeah, also there's an abundance of jellyfish here, go figure, but they're more like obstacles than enemies. Same with these cannons, they're not too common, but they do show up time to time. I will say this is the only level in the game that has a special variant of the jellyfish spawn, these blue ones. In the original, these only spawned in Spork Mountain and took 2 hits. Here, they spawn in a few areas and can be defeated in 1 hit, but just like the original, their attack radius is increased. Before I get my nitpicks, I should say, this is one of my favorite soundtracks in the game. Every time I think of the game, I think of this music track. Okay, so what's my small nitpick about the level? Well, this part I'm torn on. So to 100% the level, you have to return with both the Bubble Bowl and the Cruise Bubble, because 2 of the socks are locked behind these interactable minigames. Not to mention this one sock where you have to switch to Patrick halfway through the second level, and then backtrack to the beginning of the first area. On one hand, yeah, backtracking isn't uncommon in games, especially games within this genre, and this tells the player you'll have to backtrack to some areas later. The thing is, this and Downtown Bikini Bottom are the only levels where you have to backtrack to 100% of the levels. I'm not counting Goo Lagoon because the skee ball is optional. Wow, I just realized all 3 of the beginning levels have these backtracking components. It's just a tad bit annoying. Maybe if this backtracking gimmick showed up in a few more levels in the game, then it wouldn't feel so alienated here. Anyway, enough my rambling, on to the next level.
Goo Lagoon, a sun-drenched beach of sludge at the bottom of the sea. But all is not well here on Paradise.
Goo Lagoon is one of my personal favorites in the game, but I'm going to try to go at this with an unbiased perspective. It's just a well-rounded level. I really love the beach atmosphere and the music. As someone who went to the beach a lot as a kid, the pier section of this level brings back massive nostalgia. Okay, enough of my sentimental rambling. What do I like about the level? Well, the layout is pretty straightforward. It's not as open as Jellyfish Fields, but it isn't linear or something like the Flying Dutchman's Graveyard. It's also really easy to rack up some socks and spatulas on this level without spending a lot of shiny objects. Honestly, the only challenge in socks to find are in the cave area. Yeah, if I'm gonna be honest, the only weak link in this level is the Goo Lagoon Caves. Luckily you don't spend a lot of time in here. There's no side missions or other spatulas other than reaching the end, so it feels lacking compared to the other 2 areas. But fortunately it does stand out compared to the other cave areas in the game. I have the same issue with this area that I do with the art museum in Rock Bottom. But the other 2 levels here in Goo Lagoon are awesome. The first beach area has you jumping through the water, entering a giant sandcastle, and trying to get the light beams to point to the island. It seems really playful, and honestly it makes it stand out. One tiny nitpick I have with the first level is I feel like the graphics for the sand and the remaster are way too bright. Everything just kind of blends together. Luckily the caves don't have this problem, and neither does the final area. The final area is the pier, which also stands out for having the same kind of playful atmosphere. Having all these fun slides and games you can interact with is pretty cool. Although you'll probably get more shiny objects by just playing through the main game, I love how the skee ball is here. If you couldn't tell, I'm just a sucker for when you can interact with the environment in games. This level's platforming and enemies aren't too difficult. The most hazardous obstacles are in the cave, and drowning is probably the biggest threat. The monsoon robot is introduced, but due to how open the level is, he's not really a challenge. He's easy to take out. So, with all that being said, Goo Lagoon takes its place near the top of the list.
With sleep comes dreams. What mischief can be found in this subaquatic somnambulant realm?
Probably the most cliched choice for players, but SpongeBob's Dream is at the top of my list. I love everything about this level. The awesome trippy aesthetic, the mini areas in the level, and the fantastic theme music, which is just a remix of the mini-boss theme, but man is it a great remix. According to the manual of the original game, this is supposed to be the penultimate level before the final boss. And it makes sense, this is one of the more difficult levels of the game. It's also one of the bigger levels of the game, having 5 mini areas within it. Every mini level seems to test your abilities. Sandy's Dream tests your sliding skills, Squidward's Dream tests your platforming, and Mr. Krabs' Dream tests your combat skills. On the other side of the spectrum, most players I know go to this level first, because unlike the Kelp Forest or Flying Dutchman's Graveyard, there's no spatula requirement. If you're one of these players, you'll encounter some of the robots before you're officially supposed to meet them, like the Tubelets or the Slick. Back to the difficulty, I'm not trying to sound like IGN, but some of the platform requires some good timing, and can actually be difficult. Same with the combat section in Mr. Krabs' Dream, all it takes is one unlucky hit, and you're flying off the arena. And this is the only section in the game where the Duplicatortrons have shields. Fun fact, despite all the challenges and robots, this is the only main level with no bungee. I'm going to pivot to the mini areas of the level. Sandy's is the first you encounter and her level is huge. It could be a whole level in of itself. The slide here is massive and there's even a separate combat challenge here. I already discussed Squidward's and Mr. Krabs' Dreams, but I should mention how atmospheric they are. I mean, look at this. This is awesome. This is something that mesmerized me when I was younger. Lastly, you have Patrick's Dream, and he'll just give you a free spatula. Originally, he was supposed to have an entirely different dream, where it was like a landscape of ice cream, but honestly, I kinda like the void of Patrick's mind. It should be said you have to pay shiny objects to access these areas, but at this point in the game, you should have plenty of them. The only nitpick I have about this level is one that I've had since I was a kid playing the original. The entrance to this level is just a random area in the middle of the street where SpongeBob falls asleep. I always thought that was weird, but maybe I was just a pedantic kid. And in the remastered version, there's no sign. So there's this cult-like circle where you just enter the level. I guess I couldn't use SpongeBob's bed as it appears in the first few minutes of the game, but anyway, all around a great level, easy spatulas and socks to find, and gives some decent difficulty while having a great scenic atmosphere. I always look forward to enjoying this level whenever I play the game. With that, this level takes its rightful place at the top of the list. So that was a change of pace from my usual content. I don't think I'll do another video on this game. I can't really think of anything that I could do anyway. Like I said, I don't outright hate any of these levels. Sure, some are definitely inferior compared to others. I just hope that I explained my opinion well enough. If you agree or disagree with me, please let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.